Now, in the last session, we are trying to go through different kind of variables, and we saw the conditions and how is that you can give a loop, and what are the kind of different kind of operators like arithmetic operators and comparison operators that you can work, and also some logical operators. Now, proceeding with further, now let's get a little deeper in the variables, that is strings, list, and dictionary, because there will be certain values that you have to manipulate inside it. Okay, so now we know that if it is a string, then we will be using it. But what if there are certain requirements in which you want to manipulate the existing data? So that is when in Python we have certain built-in functions using which we can manipulate or get some particular value out of a variable. Okay, so just like how you have a function or a plugin in other cases, in Python everything what we have is called as a function, wherein if you give certain value to it and it will be working based on that. In fact, the print whatever that we were using so far is also a default function. So that way, specific for string, there are certain functions, that is the built-in functions. When I say built-in, it is being given by the Python itself. So we can make use of that and try to do some manipulation on the existing string. So let's see a couple of them. Again, there are plenty of functions like this, but I'm just going to walk you through some of the important one that you'll be using it on a day-to-day. But again, it doesn't mean that only you have this much. You have tons of them available. Okay, so now there is a function called string count. So what is the purpose of this? Suppose if you use this in your program, this will try to return the occurrence of a substring in your existing string, which means now, let's say you have a sentence that you have formed or a particular string. And in that, if you want to find if there is a particular character or a particular word, and if it is repeating, how many times it is repeating, that is particularly count the number of times a string that you have given is available within a parent string. For example, if I say that this is my string, that this is a test, and if I want to find out how many times the string or the substring or the character called is appearing, and for that, if you use the built-in function called count. So for this, now if you say the string name, that is, suppose if this is the name of the string, and if you say str, that is the name of the variable on which you are storing the string, dot count, and this will be a function, and whenever you are invoking a function you will be using a parenthesis, and within this you will be specifying the character which you want to count within this. So now what it will do is it will take this string, and in that, whatever the character or the substring that you want to count, it will check and it will return you the value how many times that it occurs in this particular string. And since we are saying print, pretty much it is going to print on the screen. Instead of printing, same thing, if you want to store it into a variable, what you can do, you can put this on the right hand side, and on the left hand side you can say a variable equal to this and it will store it. Whereas here I'm just trying to print it on the screen. Okay, so let's try this now. Let me open up one more. Okay, and now if I run Python, you can see it is printing me 2. That is because this substring is available 2 times. You can see the same thing. if I just say the character S alone, and this time it will be returning me how many? That is 3. So depending on what is the number of the occurrence of that substring that you're giving, which could be a single character or a group of characters, based on that it will be searching and giving. So sometimes when you're working on a string which is long enough, then it is quite easy for you to know if there is a occurrence happening, and if it is happening, how many times it is happening. Okay, this is one built-in function. The same way, now if any point of time you want to know the number of characters in that string. Now, it is not that always we know we will be hard coding a value. Sometimes in the runtime, when you are running the Python, you might be creating a variable and storing it. Let's say you are reading some content from a file line by line and you're storing it somewhere and parsing it. So in that case, you literally won't be knowing how big is the line. So that is how you can use this special built-in function called len or length, using which we can find out the number of characters that you have in that particular string. Okay, so if you simply say len and in the parenthesis, if you give the string which it has to check, then it will try to count the number of characters in it, and then it will be returning as the total number of characters available in it. Okay, now once again, if I want, I can store it to some other variable also. So let's see this example now. So here, what is that I'm saying? I'm saying there is a string. Once again, I'm trying to recreate with some value, and this is the line which is going to get stored. Okay, and in this, now I am saying print the length of the string and comma lenstr. So what it will do now, it will try to replace this with the number of characters in it. Okay, so this way also I can do, or simply I can also do one more thing where I will say new variable equal to, now what will this do? This is again going to return the same value, but it is going to store it into this new variable. So that is how every function that you are trying to run is basically going to return some value. Now, if you use print, it is directly going to print it on the screen. If not, if you want to store it into some variable for further use, you can do it. Now, if the same thing I say print the value of new var, and I'll say new var. Okay. You can see it is the same thing. Okay, so either you can directly use, or anytime if you're using any built-in function, you can store the output like this, where whenever you give some equals, on the right hand side whatever you have, first it will evaluate, that means it will execute it, then whatever value that you're getting, it will store it on the left hand side, that is the variable name. Whereas here this is a built-in function called length, and for that if you specify the string, then it will count the number of characters in it and it will give you this value. Getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Okay. Now, let's say you have a string, and sometimes what will happen when you're trying to read a line from a file. Now, one of the common thing that we will be doing using the scripting is you might have to parse a file, that is a log file. When I say parse, you will have to read the line one by one inside a file. How to do it? Pretty much we will see it in the next session. But the point here is, when you're trying to read a line from a file, sometimes the line might have a new line character at the end, or it might have an additional space at the end. So that is when, if you have a string, and in that, if you want to just delete the last character, and if you want to delete a specific character at the end, then you can use this built-in function called strip. Okay, wherein the name of the function or the name of the built-in function is rstrip. And what it will do is, by default, if you give a name of a string, then from that it is going to remove the space at the end. If you don't specify any character, by default it will remove the space. The same thing, if you pass a character, then it will exactly remove that particular character which is available in the last. And in case if that character is not available in the last, it will not delete. So remember, rstrip or a string strip means delete a last character, where by default it will be deleting the space, and in case if you have specified any other specific character, and if that is there, it will delete. And one more point here, when I say it deletes, no matter how many times that character is there at the end, it will delete everything. Suppose in this example, you can see there is only one space. Now, it doesn't mean that it is going to delete only one time. If you have 5 spaces at the end, it will delete everything together. In the same way, now if you have this T here more than once, then it will remove all the occurrences of that using that rstrip. Mainly, it will be used for deleting the white spaces which will be appearing at the end of the line. Okay, sometimes when you automate everything, you will not be knowing whether you have a space at the end, and sometimes while you're parsing that, you will not be getting the exact data. So what you can do is, you can pretty much use this rstrip and it will delete the last character, and if you don't specify what is that character, it will take it as the space. Okay, so now let's try to run this. So now I'll just split it up. So once again, I'm trying to put a new line where I'll say the string is, this is a test, and I'm giving a space here. And after that, if I just say the string dot this function, so it is going to call this built-in function against this string. And in that, when you don't specify anything, it is going to delete the space at the end. The same thing, let's say I have one more string, and in this, if I say the rstrip and if I give a specific character, then it will remove only that character. So let's try this. Okay, so you can see now it has exactly removed the space, and whereas here you can see that it is now removed the last character. So if you give anything else, it will not do. Let's say I'll give E, it will not do. Okay, it is only if it is T, it is going to do. At the same thing, if I have more than one T, see what happens. Okay, so it is going to remove all the occurrences of that character at the end. The same way, it could be one space or more space by default. It will delete everything and it will print the value if you want to print. The same thing, if you want to store it into some other output or variable, you can put or assign it to into a variable, and that will be storing it, because every function will return this value itself, and where instead of we storing it, I am just using it to print. Okay. Getting it?
Yes, Adam. Yes.
Okay. In the same way, now there will be certain scenarios where we want to split the string. Once again, like I said, when you are trying to parse a line from a log file, you will read a line, but from that line, you are exactly interested to only read a particular characters from it. Now let's say when you go to a file, you might be having things column by column, and in that you want to read only a particular column. Then how is that you're going to do? So basically, given a line or a string, if you're interested to split that, then you can use a built-in function called split. So how is that you're going to split? So if you have a line, basically you can specify the delimiter against which it will take that as the separator between the characters. So for example, now let's say I have a line which will say like this. Okay. Now, out of this line, if I say split this, okay, how is that you're going to split? So I will say a delimiter. A delimiter is nothing but a character using which it will be splitting this. And that character should be available in this line. Only then it will be able to split. So if I say 0 as the delimiter, then what the Python will do is it will split this line into several words based on the delimiter. So now you have a 0. So it will split it up like this. So now if you see, the single line or the single string has been divided into 4 substring or 4 words. Okay. And now when you see the output of this, it will be storing each value that you have splitted now as a list. Okay. Because earlier, if you had noted, what was this? This was one variable. Okay. So this was one string which you had everything. And but when you split this, you are basically getting 4 outputs. So because of that, how is that you're going to store 4 values? You cannot store it in a single variable, right? Then what is the type of variable we will use to store multiple values? It is a list. So this will get splitted and it will store it like this. Getting it? So basically, what will happen is when you split a line or a string, what will happen is it will split it and return the value as a list of values. Okay, that is more important. That is because with a specific delimiter on the line which is available, it is going to split the line into different values, and all the values will be internally stored as a list, or it will be returning it as a list. Okay. Now, when you do not specify a delimiter, then by default, space will be taken as the delimiter. Okay. So the same example, now if I use, this is my string. Okay. Now, if I split this, what will happen? It will internally return me a list value where, if you see, it is going to keep 3 elements in it. Okay. And if I say split, I have to give a delimiter. And if I don't give a delimiter, it will take the space as the delimiter and split it up. So depending on what characters that you give, based on that, it will split. And if not, it will take space as the delimiter and it will split. Now let's say if I split this using is as the delimiter, what will happen then? If I split it using is, then here you can see that from here to here there is 1, right? So it will take this as the first element, and then this is the delimiter, so it won't do it. Next it will take from here to here, that is the second value, so it will store a null value, and then from this to this there is one more value, so it will store it like this. So pretty much now, how many characters that it will store? In fact, 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so this is how it is going to store if I just give only is. Instead, if I say the delimiter is space is space, then before this there is only one delimiter that's separating, and after this there is only one value. So basically it will store it as 2 elements. Getting it on how we will be splitting the lines?
Yes, Adam.
Let's try to run the same thing. Let me print it here. So here, if you see, this is the line or the string that I'm using. And for that, first we will just say the split. And then I'm going to use this as the delimiter and split it. And let's see what is the output for this. So you focus only from here. Now, do you see what is the output? It is automatically giving us a list, because only for a list, you will be using the square bracket and you will be trying to store different elements, right? The same thing, if I say split using this, that is space, is space, then it is giving me only 2. The same if I simply say only is. So you can see, as we saw, first it is going to take th, because this is one column, and then after this is there is one more space between is, that is the second value or column, and then the rest of the thing is one more, so it will take that as the next one with the space. Okay, so this is how you can split, and not only split, you can pretty much now store it into a list and you can make use of it. So that is how you can easily get. Now, given the string, if I want to exactly get the middle value, or if I want to get only the last character or the group of word, then if I split like this, and I can easily put it into a list, and now in a list I know that I am interested to get only the last value. So how will I get the last value of the list? If I simply say the name of the list that I've created, that is the square bracket -1, what will happen? It will give me the last value that you have got. Same way, if I want to get the first value, I'll get 0. So you will use that variable concept of list. That is the reason it is trying to return the value in terms of a list, so that we can easily now retrieve only a specific value, whatever is of our interest. Getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Okay, so that is some of the important built-in functions that we have for string. Now, similarly, we also have some built-in function for the list itself. So once again, what is the list? Asking you.
List, so,
It is a
storage of variables.
it is a variable where you will
Yeah.
be storing more than one value, or it will be having multiple elements in a variable. So such a kind of variable is list. Now, once again, if there is a requirement where I want to know what is the length of your list, which means how many elements are there in the list, there might be some requirement. So once again, we can use the same length that we saw for the string. You can apply it here also. So now, simply if you say length, the function, and in the in the parenthesis, if I give the name of the list, okay, that is the variable, then it will count the number of elements and it will return us the value. Now, if you can see here, instead of directly returning, I am storing it in this. So what will happen now if I give like this in the equal? Whatever is on the right hand side will first get evaluated. And when you run this, it is going to count and return the number of elements. And then that will be get stored into this variable. And what kind of variable is this? This is a normal string, or if you are storing this, the number, then that is a number variable, which is going to store only one value. And if you run it, you will get the output as length of the list is how much?
3.
Is it 3? Let's try to see that. Okay. So based on the number of elements that you are trying to get, it will try to store it in this. Whereas since you are trying to store, it will be internally stored into this variable and you can print it. So that's how you can store it so that whenever you want, you can reuse them. Sometimes what will happen, if I want to do some program that I'll give you a couple of examples later. Now, the question that may come is, I will give you a list of values and I want to run some functionality for all of them. Now, how would I know what is the value that I have? So that is when you need to know each and every element and the total number of element. Okay, so that cases you will be using. Or let's say I'm asking you to write a program where I will give you a list with a set of values. Give me the average of that. So that case, to get an average, you need to get a single value as well as the total number of value. So that case now, if I simply do the length of this, I'll be getting the total number of elements. And for getting the average, I need to add all these values, right? How can you add a value now from this list?
Hmm. I mean, you have to assign a value to that.
Can you recall this example?
Yeah, yeah, I got it.
So yesterday we saw if I want to go through a loop of a given value, then I can pretty much use a list and based on the number of elements in it, I can run it. Okay, so now here, if I say the user bin Python and let's create a list. So for this list, I'll give the value as 10, 20, 30. Okay, I want the average of this. So to get the average, what and all you want to do first? You need to know how many elements you have and then the total of that. So that average is the total addition value divided by the number of elements you have, right? So for this, now, how do you get the total? So to get the total, I have to add everything one by one. Okay, one simple way I can do is I can take each index and add it. But if you're running in a program where you don't know how many characters, I mean, how many elements are there, then you cannot use the element directly, right? If you recall, once again, if I say this, what will it give me? It will give me this value. The same thing if I say like this, you will get the complete value, right? Did you forget? Once again, going back to the
Yeah, yeah, I got it.
here. So if you say a particular index number, you will be getting back the exact value that you have stored, right? In the same way for the list also. If you want to get exactly this value, you will say list of 0. And if you say list of 1, you will be getting the same way. Now, if you want to get this, I can do. This is one way of doing. And now, to get the total, we did this. But to get our average, I need the length, correct? So how will you get the length or the number of elements? So that is when we are going to use what? The length here. So now, simply if I say a new variable, okay, let's say list length, and to this I'll say length and the list, it will be giving me the total number of elements in it. So that now if I say average equal to total divided by the list length, it will give me the value. And if I say print average value is, what is this? If I say avg, it will be get me the value, right?
Yeah, done.
Let's run this. Getting it?
Yeah, done.
So this is how, going forward, whatever scenario that you get, you have to think about using everything. That is the variables, how to get a value from a variable, and all this built-in functions, your if condition, as well as your looping. So everything has to be put together, and then you have to provide a solution. That is why we are trying to see all those things. Okay, next.
Yeah.
Now, what if to an existing list you want to add another value? Now, I have an existing list, and for that, if I want to add a new value like this here, so we had only three. Suppose if I want to add a fourth element to it, then you will use this built-in function called append. So if you say the name of the variable, that is the list variable, dot append, and in the parenthesis, if you give a specific value, that will get added to it. Okay, so the same thing. So now if I print this before, let me say print value of list before. Okay, and I'll say list. The same thing, we will append a new element to it, and then we will say the list. So first of all, where it will get added? It will get added at the where end, because the list is always a ordered list. When I say ordered, it will be always be there in the same way, whereas only a dictionary, the values will be changing, I mean interchanging, whereas a list is a ordered way of putting up a different or multiple values or elements. So you can see first you had only these three, but now since you added a new element, it got added to the end. And then the value of the list, if you see the variable, it has four elements, and the fourth one is the value called 4. Got it?
Yes, I done.
Now, the same requirement. So if I say append, what is it going to do? It is going to add the new element or append the element at the end of the list. That is at the last element it is going to add. But if you have some requirement where you don't want to add it or append it at the end, you want to add it somewhere in between, then you will be using the function called insert. So for the insert, you have to specify two values now. The first one is at what index do you want to add it, because you are going to specifically put it in between wherever it is needed. So you will be telling the index number, because we know in a list only through an index reference we will be taking a value, right? So that is how, now since we are trying to go in between and put a value, we should exactly tell what is the index number on which the next value is the exact element which you want to add. So now if you say for an example here as 3 and 5 on the existing list of variables, sorry, the list of values, what Python will do is it will go to the third index. So what is the third index here? 0, 1, 2, 3. So exactly at this place it will put this value. by adding it, what will happen? This value will pushed to the next element. That means the third value will be put as the 5 and the ABC will become the fourth index. Okay, so that is how you will be adding it specifically at a particular index number. Okay, so let's try to run this. So here, once again, I'll say print and list before insert. Okay, so here, if you look, first I'm just printing it, and then we will print the list before insert, that is list, and then you are trying to add it at the third index, and then if you try to put it up once again, we will see that the value got updated. Now there is a flaw here, because now if you try to use it, what is happening? You are asking the Python to use a value and print, but the value of this you are given it here. So what it will do is, if there is a list variable that is defined before this, it will take that value. So in our case, it should be printing this. Sorry, it should be printing the last value as this. So let's run this. You will try to see the difference. Do you see? It is saying list before insert is some other value. Why? Because at this point of time, what is the value of list variable? The one that you have given from the last time. Because this value is after this. That is why it is not taking. So now if I want to print this, then pretty much I need to give this after the defining. So that is one. Remember to use a variable only after we define it. Okay, so that was the first thing that I told you when I'm creating a variable. So you cannot create a variable after calling it. So pretty much first thing you have to define the variable and then use it. So now you run, you can see the value before the insert is 4, and in that you are exactly adding the value called 5 at the third index, that is 0 1 2 3. So it gets added at the 3, and the existing one will get pushed and it will become the fourth index. Getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Okay, now by append or insert, you are adding a new element. What if you want to remove an element? Then you will be using the built-in function called remove. So now, regardless of what element it is, if you just give the value of the element, it will remove it from the list straightforward, and it will store the remaining thing in the list. Okay, so the same thing now for this, what I'll do is I'll try to remove one more. So let's say print remove function. Okay, and in this, let me paste it. So once again, I'm trying to assign the new variable, and for that you have 1 2 3 4 5 values, and from that I'm going to remove this. So what will happen? It will try to remove and it will give me 1, 2, 3, 4 values only. So final list after remove. Okay. So I'll say list before remove. Okay. So you can see this, that the list before remove is you have all the value, and from that if you remove the element called xyz, then the remaining thing now will be without it. So that's how you can add any element or remove any element in the runtime. Okay, getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Okay, the same way. Now what we saw, okay, there's one more called reverse. So now you will have a scenario where we know the list is nothing but the ordered way of putting up multiple values. So at any point of time, now if you see the first index or the zeroth index of this list will always be this value, and the second element or the index 1 will always be this. So some reason, if you want to reverse this, then you will use the function called reverse. So what reverse will do is it will try to reverse the complete value. So rather than having from this way, it will be trying to print everything from this. So if you want to switch the value for certain reason, you can make use of this. So let's try to run this and see how it will reset. Okay, and here I'll say reverse list, and I'll say print list. Okay, now so here I'm first printing the list, and once again here the same problem. First you have to define and then try to use the value. So now let's try to run this. So you can see now the list before the reverse was this way, and after you reversed, you see that all the values has been taken. That is, this value is first, then this value is second, and this value is third, and this value is fourth, and the first value become the last value. So that's how you can reverse the elements that you have in a list. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, Adam.
Okay. So those are the certain built-in functions that we had for the list. Same way, we also have one more important variable type called dictionary. So to quickly recall, what is a dictionary? Dictionary is again a variable which will hold many values. But the difference is you are not going to store the value directly, but you will be storing the element in terms of a key and a value pair. Okay, so that is how you're going to store. So in that way, now if you want to manipulate the data from a dictionary, then we have certain built-in function for that. So now if you have some value, and if you want to know whether in that particular dictionary there is a particular key which is there or not. So we won't be able to know directly, right? So in that case, what we can do is we can use a function called has underscore key. What it will do is if you try to give a name of a key to this, then it will check whether that key is available in the dictionary, that is the variable. And in case if it is there, then it will be returning us a true value. Okay. So in that case, if it is not there, then it will return as a false. So that is how we can identify whether there is a particular key available in that variable, that is the dictionary variable. Okay. Now, I've written a simple example here where what this example says is, first thing is we are defining a dictionary or a variable where this is the first key pair value and this is the second key pair value. Let me write it up here. That will be easy. So now here I am creating or I am defining a dictionary or a variable where this is the first element and this is the second element, where this is a key pair value. So what is the name of the key? The name of the key or the key is fname and the value for that is Adam. Same way, I have one more pair for which the key name is sname and the value of that is m, which means my first name and my last name. So I'm giving it as a key pair value. So if you want to check, if I simply say the variable name dot has key and in the parenthesis, if I give the key name, it will check whether this key, that is the name that you have given, is available in the dictionary. And if it is available, it is going to return a true for us. And now I can put the same thing into a if condition where if this condition is matching or true, then I will print saying that there is a key by the name fname in the dictionary. Okay, so that is how you can see now I'm making use of the if condition as well as the has key built-in function. Okay, so let's try to run this. Okay, it says there is a syntax error at line 4. Okay, you can see now what is it saying? That it is saying now the same thing. Let me give some other key. Okay, I'll say let me say you have something called hname. So do you have a key by the name called hname in it? No, there are only two keys. So if you try to run, it will not give you anything. So here I can use a else and I can say what? Else print there is no hname key in the dictionary. You can see. So you're going to make use this way now so that at any point of time you want to search for some key name, then you can use this has underscore key against a particular dictionary variable. And if that key is available, then it will return a true value. And in case if the key is not available, then it will return a false. Getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Okay. The same way. Now, if you want to delete a key from a particular dictionary, then what you can do is you can use the built-in function called delete. Okay, so if you say delete and give the name of the dictionary and what particular key that you want to delete, then it will not just delete the key, but it will delete the entire element together, because it is one pair of value. So it is not just a key separate, but a pair is all about a key and a value together is what we call it as a pair. Okay, and from that, if you just say delete and give the particular key name, it will be deleting it. So let's try to use this. From this, now, if I say this, and now, if I want to know whether this is, okay, now before that, let's do this way. I'll put F name here. And so if you run this, now what is it saying? It is saying that there is a key available, correct? That is because you have this. Now, let's delete this before running. So what I'm doing is, as soon as I'm creating a dictionary variable, I'm deleting one key called fname. Then let us search this. Now you can see that it clearly says there is no fname. That is because you have deleted the key from that dictionary. Okay. So this is how you can delete a particular key pair value by just giving the key name so that it will completely remove it. The same thing. Now, rather than just deleting one key, if you want to simply delete everything together, okay, that is, you want to just create an empty dictionary but no value in it, then simply say dict dot or the name of the dictionary dot clear. Okay, so if you say this, what it will do, it will try to delete it completely. So if you say this way, the name of the variable dot clear, this is the built-in function which will clean all the value together. Okay. Same thing. Now, instead of saying this, if I just say text dot clear, you can still see that it says it has no key. That is because it has not just removed one, it has also removed s name. You can check this. If I say s name, it will do the same thing. You can still say that it is printing this line. That is because even this key is not there. So if you want to delete all the keys or complete value at one shot, you will say dict, that is the dictionary name dot clear. Okay.
Yeah, done.
Now we saw this in the first session where when we were defining a variable. So if you want to know what and all are the list of keys available in a dictionary, so you want to quickly know how many keys are available and what and all are they, then you can simply use the built-in function called keys. So if you just say the dictionary name dot keys, then it will give you the complete number of keys that is available totally. Okay, so let's say this. Now we can see the same difference here. Now, if I print this, see what it shows, and the same thing I'll print it after. What's happening? Built-in method object. Okay, here. Hmm. Okay, so now you can see it is going to return you two keys. The same thing after clearing, if I put this, you can see it gives you a empty. So that is how keys will return you all the keys that you have in your dictionary variable. But pretty much in this scenario, you have cleared everything. So that is why the list is empty. I mean, list in the sense the number of keys that you have is empty because you have deleted everything. Okay. The similar way, if you want to get only the values, so instead of getting the keys, if you want to get only the values, then you can say the dictionary name dot values. Same thing here. So you can see now it is giving you the key names, and then the values function is going to call you the values only. But after this, you do not have anything. Okay, so that's how you will use the built-in function called keys that will return all the name of the keys that you have in the dictionary. The same thing if you say values, it will be returning you the values alone. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so like this, now you will be using some built-in functions, and if you want to manipulate some value that could be either in a number or it could be in a string or a list or a dictionary, you can manipulate it. Okay, so moving ahead, there is something called as function. Now, it is just similar to any kind of programming. What exactly is a function? So sometimes we also call it as a subroutine. So there is no difference between calling it as a function or a subroutine. A few people call it a subroutine, but in Python specifically, we'll be calling it as a function. So what is a function? Why do we need it? So when you're writing a program or in scripting in Python, you will be having a huge number of lines in it, right? And let's say you want to group a particular list of lines to have a more meaningful value. Now, for example, if you're writing a line of code and you want to reuse this line of code for different purpose, so that is when, rather than just writing it everything from top to bottom, you can actually group certain lines and you can put it into a function. Okay, wherein a function is nothing but a group of lines, that is the statement or whatever code you're writing in Python, that you will group together and put it as a function. So what is the necessity of grouping it like this? So the major advantage, if you see, first thing is it will be easy for us to break down the complete program or the script, and it will be easy for us to debug it, or anything that you want to change we will be exactly know, and it will be easy for us to understand. So assume that your Python code has 600 lines. By the time you scroll from top to bottom, it will be confusing for you on what has been put it. So that is how you can group certain set of lines which is going to do certain activity and put it into a function, so that I can easily know, okay, this group is used for doing this activity. Or if I want to change something, where is the corresponding group of line, there you will go and change it. That is one way. If you keep functions by grouping certain lines, it will be easy for us to maintain. Okay, and then if you want to reuse the same group of line for redoing some activity, then you can pretty much call. That is the another advantage by grouping it, so that you're not just going to group, but whenever you want to recall it, you can pretty much recall the same thing again and again as many times that you need. Okay, so that is the other advantage of using functions. And the third thing is you don't want to duplicate, because when you're writing a huge set of lines of code for doing some functionality, there might be some chances where you will be trying to write a similar line of code which will be duplicating the functionality. So that is how a simple function is nothing but grouping certain line of code or statement which will be giving a single functionality. Okay, so that is how you will be writing functions in actual. So if you see any production code, you will be seeing everything as functions itself, so that it is a good way of writing any kind of scripting or program. So Python is also going to use the same way. So far, whatever we did was simple line of code. Whereas if you're trying to write complex code or multiple lines of code, then you have to make it as a practice of grouping them together. Again, it is not mandatory, but it is a best practice to do it. Okay. So how is that you are going to define a function? So whenever you are defining a function, then you will use the keyword called def, and followed by that, you will give the name of the function, and then you will give a parenthesis. Okay, by this way, you are defining a function, and beneath that, whatever values or the line of code that you want to put under it, you will be putting under it. Okay, and then whenever you are defining the particular function, and make sure first thing is you have to end the definition line using colon. That is what it represents, that you have first given the name of the function and you have defined, and then whatever statements that you have to follow beneath it, you have to use a indentation. That is how the Python will know that these line of code is as part of a single group for this function name. Okay, so remember those two things. So to define, first you will use this keyword def followed by some string name that will be defining your name of the function, and then followed by parenthesis, and then you will give a colon, and then whatever is the group of line that you want to put as part of this function, you will put beneath it, and everything has to be indented properly, just like how you did a condition or a while loop. Anything that will be part of this function, that is the group of line, you will be putting it under it using a proper indentation. Okay, now by defining it, Python will not run anything that you have specified. So how will Python run it? So if you want Python to run the line of code inside this, then you have to call the function. So wherever you are going to call the function, at that particular point of execution, it will go inside the function, it will call everything. That is how you can pretty much reuse the same code. For example, in the line 1, if I call this, what it will do, at that point of time, it will go inside the function, call whatever you have specified. The same way, if I call this once again at line 10, once again at that point of time, it is going to call whatever that you have given inside it. Okay, so that is how you will first define a function, and then you will try to give a value inside it, and whenever you want to run that, you basically call the function. Okay, so now let's try to put it up with a simple example that I have here, and let's try to run this. So here, so let's first understand this. So before calling a function, first thing we have to do is defining. Now, what I'm defining is, I'm saying there is a new function that has been defined, and the name of the function is print me. Okay, this is the name of the function. And to define it completely, I will use parenthesis and end with colon. And for this, I am going to give the group of lines which I have to call it. Okay. Now in this, I have giving a line called print. I am inside the function. Okay. And then there is something also called as return. We'll talk about it later, but make it a practice. Whenever you are defining a function, the last line of your group of statement which will be part of this function should be written. Why we are going to do, we will see it later. But remember, when you are defining a function, and for that function, if you are defining some statement, that is line of code that you want to run, then the last line will always be written. Okay, then you have defined this. Okay, now if you want to call this particularly, now from here to here, this is one block of statement, that is one group. Now if you want to invoke this particular function, then at any point simply say the name of the function followed by parenthesis, and wherever you are calling this, it will be going inside this and it will be running all the statement that you have given. Okay, now let's save this and let's try to run. So you can see now, first definition. So as part of the definition, it is not doing anything. Then it is going ahead with the program. The first line that you have said is calling print me function. So it is displaying it as it is. And then it is calling this particular print me. So when it calls at this point of time, it will go to this function, whatever definition, and inside this, whatever you have, it is going to execute. So that is why there is one line called print that is getting executed, and it says I am inside the function. And after it is completing, it will once again come back to the same line and then proceed. And when you are proceeding, it says this is the last line and it is going to print. Okay, now see, if I once again call this after this, then wherever I call at that particular point of time, it will go to the function definition, and whatever that you have given inside it, it will be executing it. So that is how you can also reuse the same function to run again and again as many times as you want. So you can see first it ran between this, and after running this, I am once again calling the same function. Because of that, it is going inside the function and it is executing the block of statement corresponding to it. Okay, so this is how you will be basically writing a function where you will first define it, and wherever you want to call, you will simply call the function by giving the name and the parenthesis. Okay, getting it on what is a function first, the simple function.
Yeah, Adam.
We will see
Very clear.
deeper. Okay, so a function means I'll have some group of lines, I'll put it together. For that, first I have to define, and wherever I want to call, I will simply say the name of the function and the parenthesis. And wherever I give that calling, at that place exactly, it will run all the line or the group of statement that you have as part of that function. Okay.
Okay.
So once again, the purpose of function is you are going to group them, right? So when I say group, you are basically going to do something inside it. Now, when you are going to run some function, ideally from your parent, so if you see actually, this is your parent or main program. That is what we call. So as part of your main program, first you are running, then you are calling. So in this, you go here, complete, and then come back. And then you are going here and then coming back. So like this, whenever you are calling a function, there might be necessity for passing some values inside it, and based on that, it has to do. That is the reason why you are grouping it. So in that way, now, how is that you are going to pass some value to that function so that the function will take some value and act accordingly. Okay. So when you want to pass a value, there are different ways using which we can pass a value to the function. So we don't just call it as a value, but we call it as an argument, because you can pass more than one value to a function. Okay, so that is when, if you want to pass a particular arguments to the function, basically there are three types of arguments that you can pass. So let's see what is it with couple of examples to make it more easier to understand. So the first thing is required argument. So whenever you want to pass an argument to a function, and if you define it as a required argument, then you have to exactly pass it. In case if you do not pass, as the name says, it will throw an error saying that argument is required. So that is how you are making sure that the value that you want to pass to a particular function is mandatory. Okay, and like I said, you can have more than one argument or value that you want, you can pass into it. And if you are saying that my function needs two argument, then what is that you have to do? While calling it, you have to make sure that you are passing those two values at all. You cannot just say one value. Then again, it will give you an error. Okay, so that is how a required argument means you are making it compulsory that while defining how many arguments that you want to take to the function, that many arguments has to be passed while calling it. Okay, so to understand this now, first we should know how is that you are going to tell to the function that it needs one or two or whatever argument, right? So that will be done by defining the argument itself. So when you are actually defining the function name, at that point of time itself, you can give what and all are the parameters or the arguments that it is going to take. So what is an argument or a parameter? It is nothing but a value. And in a Python, how is that you are going to store a value? It is on a variable, right? So pretty much arguments or the parameters are nothing but the variables which the function is going to use. Okay, so now depending on how many variables or the arguments that you want the function to take, then you specify that here. So an example here is, if I say the same function that we have used now, and if I give some name here, what is this? It is a name or a string, but internally what is this? It is a variable. Okay, and now if you pass a number to it, it is going to be a numeric variable. If the same thing, if you pass a string, it is going to be a string variable. And since for our reference, I'm giving as a str, the name itself as str, which represents that I'm going to pass a value which is a string to it. Okay, so this is how now you are making it mandatory that by defining this function called print me requires one variable or one argument. Okay, so that is what you are making it as a mandatory thing. Okay, and now let's twist the same program where instead of printing some value, if I just say print and this variable here, whatever value that you're going to pass here will get stored into this variable, and that is what it is going to be present here, right? So this way you are going to make use of this variable or argument inside your function. Okay, at the same thing now, how do you pass the value to this function? So that is when, while you are calling your particular function, you can pass the arguments here or the parameters here. Okay, so the first example that we saw is we didn't pass anything because it didn't need anything. But now if I define here that this function requires a variable or an argument, then for passing it, while you call within the parenthesis, you will be giving the value of that argument. So whatever that you pass here, that will be stored as the name of the variable here. Getting it?
Yeah, Adam.
So now let's try to use the same. So here I'll say the same thing wherein so I'll say my string. Okay. What is this? It looks like just an argument, but internally this is a variable name. And now instead of printing this, I'm going to print my variable. That is my string. Okay. And now while you're calling the function, now let me just call it like this. Okay. See what happens first. Now first, if you see that it is saying that this particular function takes exactly one argument. And that is why such a kind of argument that you're going to pass is called as a required argument. Okay. Now, if you have defined it, then it is mandatory that you should be passing some value. Now, whatever value that you pass here, let's say I'll pass, this is a test line. And if you run this, you can see whatever value that you are passing here, it is taking as one variable, that is a string variable, and that is what you are printing it here. Okay, so anything that you pass now will be taken as one variable and then it will be stored inside this. Getting it? So this kind
I have understood.
of defining a variable where it is mandatorily you are defining this. So it is mandatory that we have to pass one argument while calling this function. So such a kind of argument is what we call it as required argument. Okay.
Yeah, Adam.
Now, the same thing that we have, one more type is keyword argument. What is keyword argument? Now, if you are trying to use this keyword argument in a function call, then from wherever you are calling this, it will identify the arguments by the name. So instead of passing the value alone, if you have more than one argument, then rather than just blindly sending, you can specify the exact name of the argument and you can pass. So the example here I can give for that is before going in. Now let's say this needs two arguments. Okay, this is only one what you have defined. Now I'll say this is my string 1 and I'll have one more called my string 2. Okay, now here if I say my string 1, let's stay here. My string 1 is my str1. Okay, the same thing if I want to print the second. Okay, and in this if I pass it like this, so you can see now you are passing two values or two arguments using comma, because of which here you are taking two values. You getting the difference? You're passing two values, whereas here you are taking two values. So whatever the first value that you're going to pass will be taken as the value for the first argument or first variable. So that is why in the my str1 variable, we are trying to store this. The same way on the next one, we are storing this. So it pretty much depends on how you pass the value. Okay, the same thing now, let's say I pass this as the first one. Now what will happen? Python doesn't care what is the way that we are calling it. It just cares about if this function needs two values. So whatever the first value that you're giving, I'll store it in it. And whatever the value that you're going to pass me after that, it is going to store here. So correspondingly, it is going to display in this way. So getting it on the way that it takes up actually. So it literally doesn't care whether what value that you're passing. Okay, so this is how you're going to pass a value to arguments. But now, if you are trying to pass a value in which you don't care about the order in which you're passing, but if I want to exactly pass a value only to this first argument or to the second argument, then you're going to make use of this keyword argument, where while passing, simply, if I exactly give the value by assigning it to a variable, the same variable that I've given inside it, then the value will be passed only to that exactly. Okay. Now, let's say if I want this value to be passed exactly to the my str2, then I can simply say this is, I'll say my str2 equal to. The same way, when you're passing up this here, you will say the same one as the name of the argument or the variable. So here I'll say my str1 equal to this. So now, even though I am passing this as the first argument, you can see it is going to exactly take it like this, because you are specifying using the keyword or the argument name, that is the variable name. Okay, so that is how you can shuffle the values and pass, but still, if you want to exactly pass the value for the same argument, then you pass it using the name of the argument and the value. So such a way of calling it is what we call it as a keyword argument. So this way doesn't literally care about what is the order that you're passing. But if you don't use the keyword that is the argument variable name or the argument name, then pretty much it is going to take in the order, and based on the order what you have defined, it will be taking the value. Getting it?
Yes, Adam. Same.
Okay. Now, for the same thing, there might be some scenario where you don't want to pass all the arguments. Now, for the same example that I was showing you, let's say you want to pass only one value. Then what will happen? Still, it will be failing, because as per the first type of argument that we have saw, if you define one argument, then you need to pass a value as a mandatory to it, right? Now, let's say if I don't pass this. So now, what is that I'm doing? I'm saying that I need to use this value for this argument. So this is fulfilled, but you still have one more argument left as it is, right? So because of which the condition goes back that this is a required argument. So unless and until you don't pass, the function will not work. So in that case, what you can do is, when you want the values to be optional, whether the user wants to use or not, that is up to the user. But as per the functionality, you need to have some kind of value to it when you are trying to call the Python program. So for that, we can use the default argument as the option, where while defining it, you can give some value, so that now the same thing, while defining, let's say I give some value. Okay, so now what will happen is whether the user is passing out or not, it will always take this as the default value. And if the user passes the value, then it will override this with whatever value that you're passing. So if you see now, uh, hmm, non-default argument follows default argument. How come? I'm giving the default argument here. Mhm. What's wrong? It says non-default argument. Yes. Wait a minute. Ah, what a logic. I don't know. So here you can see that now if I don't pass any value here because I'm passing only one value. So by default, I'm assigning that to my string 2. That argument is being stored. And since I'm not passing any value for this argument, it is trying to store the default as test. The same thing now, if I pass some argument here, new line, what happened? Huh? Non-keyword argument after argument. Non-keyword. Where is the non-keyword? Okay, let's pass this way. Phew. Anyways, so you can see now, if I'm trying to specify it exactly, then it is going to overwrite with the default one. So instead, if I want to directly call, if I don't call the second argument, that is my str1, then it will take the particular value. The same thing, if you are trying to pass a particular value, then it is going to exactly take that as the value. Getting it?
Do we have to mention mystr1 and mystr2 while
Yes.
calling?
Yes.
What if we don't mention? Does it take it automatically?
It is because you're defining it in that way here. So when you're
Ah,
defining it, it's
okay.
pretty much trying to ask. That's what it's saying clearly, that here, when you're trying to run, this is a non-keyword argument. So make sure that you are passing it as an argument exactly.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Now, so this is how, if you want, you can pass an argument, or you can give an option, or you can change the pattern, whatever you want. Now, it is not mandatory that I should give it second. I can basically use it as the first and also give it. So the order is not important. So those are the three types of arguments that you can specifically use to pass in the program. And coming to the final one. So you had a line called return, right? So what is the purpose of that? So if you had gone through the clear understanding of the built-in function, so while running the string manipulation or list manipulation or dictionary, we used some built-in function, right? Like length, append, delete, whatever we did. basically when you did all those things, I was saying something as it is going to return a value and it is going to return a value. So what was the purpose? That is because every function that you call, it is going to basically return some value. So that is how whatever the built-in functions that we had written, I mean, we had called was returning some value based on the functionality written in it. Like the length built-in function, it was trying to return a value that you are going to get out of it. And for that, you are passing an argument. It is exactly the same thing what you're going to do here, wherein these functions that we are writing now are our functions or user defined functions, whereas all those functions that we have used so far, that is the length or the number of count that you want to do, all those things are built-in functions. The same way, the name of the string or the name of the variable that you were passing to it is the argument. Okay, the same way now we are trying to call our user defined function, and for that I am trying to pass a value that is the argument. Okay, so in the same way, now every function that you're writing should return a value by default. So that is when you will use a statement called as return, where this return will help us to return some particular value to the program whenever the function completes. And if you have a specific value that it has to return, then you can make use of this return statement to specifically return some value. If not, it is going to just return an empty value. Okay, so that is how whatever functions that we were calling so far was actually returning some value, because you are going to say return. So if you use the return statement without any values or arguments for this, then it is going to return a none value. So let's quickly see the same example what we've used. Now I am calling this here, right? Now while calling, since this is returning a value, what it means is after this function is completed, the last value that has been done is returning a value. So this function is actually returning some value, just like how we use the built-in function. So if you want to store that, if you simply say some variable and put it inside it and try to print this now, see what is it going to print. It is saying none, because when you are returning a keyword called return from the Python function, by default it will always return this value. So it is actually returning a string called none, and that is being captured by this variable called var, and that is what we are seeing it here. Instead of this, if you want to return some other value, you can use this. For example, if I just say the string or a number called 10, see this what happens. You can see it is capturing it here. So return means it is going to return a value that you're going to specify here at the call of the function. So that is how this will be completed and it will be capturing. That is how all the built-in functions that we were using actually is a group of line that has been written by the program directly, and after it is completing its task, it is trying to return a value. So as an example, if I said length of the string, internally that was some function return and it has some line, and after returning, the last line of that built-in function length was giving back the value. That is how we were trying to capture it into some variable or directly print it. Getting it? What is the purpose of return and how is that you're going to return?
Yeah, Adam.
Okay, so now let's take a function, the same question that I was asking you. If you want to write a program for taking an average using a function, okay, so you can make use of the same function and you can try to write a program. So when you want to write a program now, let's write a function quickly. So first I'll say function average, And for a function, now let's say you need three values against which you are going to do some average. So I will say value 1 comma value 2, okay, or if you want to give another one, I'll say value 3, okay. And then now once you have taken this value, the same thing that I can do the averages, I can say total equal to, what is it, val1 plus val2 plus val3, a simple one. And now I'll take the average of this. For this I need to know the total length, so I will say the number equal to length of what, all the three together, or simply if I know that this is going to be directly 3, then I'll say 3. So here I'll say average equal to total divided by 3. And now if I want to return, I'll simply say return and the average. Okay, this is the function definition. And the same thing if you want to call, if you simply say average, and in this if you're going to say 10 comma 20 comma 30, and if you want to store this, I can say some value like return. And now if you say print average value is, and if I say ret, then whatever value that you have passed on the return, which will be captured here, and it will be putting it up here. Okay, so this is how you can make use of the function. Now what if I want to call the same function again different value, then I can simply reuse it once again. So here instead of 10 20 30, once again I can give some other value, and it is going to run exactly. Now you can see by just defining it once, you can make use of this function and again, and you can redo the same value as many times as you want. So that is the use case where you can repetitively use the functions as many times as you want by passing different values. Getting it?
Yeah, Adam.
Okay, so let me stop it